5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to your Media Mosh podcast. I am your host, Shane Beauregard, coming at you with all your news, reviews, and previews out to watch on your summer services, your television, and your local theater. I hope everyone's had a great week, coming at you Monday night, October the 28th. And this is my third annual Halloween special. So buckle in. This is going to be a fly by the seat of my pants episode. This is what you get when you don't really think, or when you lose track of the month and Halloween is coming up. I should have saved all of last week's reviews for this particular episode. But have no fail, I will fill this in episode somehow, in some way. I do have my It Chapter 2 review for you. I finally got around to seeing that movie this past week, and I'm just going to give you a bunch of lists. And yes, I think last year I did give you my top 5 horror movies, but if you go back and watch some of these movies, over time your opinion changes, and I got a chance to rewatch some of these classic movies. And as always, some of them just don't hold up the way you remember them holding up. And I do apologize. Usually the first 2 Halloween specials I've always collaborated with the missus over at Argue Myself. But our schedules could not get lined up. And since Halloween is Thursday, I don't want to do a post-Halloween special, if that makes any kind of sense. So you're not going to get any of your typical news. I will save that for next week. All you need to know about next week at the theater is the return of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sarah Connor in Terminator Dark Fate. So let's just jump right into what you can watch right now on Netflix and Amazon Prime as we head into Halloween. Here are some notable, what I consider notable, you may not, but I consider notable Halloween movies you can find on Netflix right now. You have the Scream series, The Conjuring, Candyman, the very well done and not seen enough Creep in Creep 2, the Mike Flanagan Project Hush, All the Boys Love Mandy Lane with Amanda Heard, and I actually enjoyed The Cult of Chucky. Then you have The Invitation and Eli, which I did review last week. Over on Amazon Prime, I feel like you have a little better selection here. You have High Tension, the 1974 Black Christmas, the original Child's Play, the original Children of the Corn, one of my all-time favorite cult movies, the 1988 Killer Clowns from Outer Space. You have the 1986 Monster Squad. You have Pumpkinhead and Hatchet, the whole entire Hatchet series, which that is what is for your viewing pleasure over on Netflix and Amazon Prime. Now let's get into some horror directors. I'm going to give you my list of up-and-coming, some of them have been around just for a little bit, but more or less are up-and-coming horror directors. Most of the lists you'll see of all-time favorites are done by some of the greats, Wes Craven, John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper. The list goes on. So let's start off this list, and I'm not putting these in any order. These, in my opinion, are directors you should keep an eye on, and some of them are no-brainers. Like, let's start off with Jordan Peele, no-brainer. To me, he has back-to-back home runs with Get Out and this year's Us. And he's also revived the Twilight Zone series on the CBS All Access. And I don't know what he has up his sleeve, but I know he's working on another project. My personal favorite right now, well, one of them, is Mike Flanagan, who is coming out with Dr. Sleep, coming out November 8th with Ewan McGregor. I first took note of him in the Netflix original Hush. He's also went on and directed Oculus, Gerald's Game, and what I think is a very mature, underrated film, Before I Wake, which you can find on Netflix right now. Next on the list is David Sandberg, who just directed Shazam, but his original movie, Lights Out, was a nice little horror film. And you also have Annabelle Creation, which in my opinion is the best movie of the Annabelle series in the Conjuring universe. You also have Fede Alvarez, who remade Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, which is a far gorier version. I did not enjoy it as much as the originals, but he took a step out there and he put his own stamp on that franchise and changed enough of it, which I could appreciate. Just wasn't my full cup of tea. But he really opened my eyes with the movie Don't Breathe, which has some really nice twists and turns. It was a movie about a bunch of teenagers breaking into a blind man's home, and they became the hunted while he turned into the hunter. And then his recent film was The Girl in the Spider Web, which I have not seen yet. So keep an eye on him. Next on my list is Andy Muschietti, or Muschietti. I don't know how to really pronounce that. He, of course, is coming off It Chapter 1 and 2, but I also loved his first movie, Mama, that also starred Jessica Chastain. But my personal favorite right now, and it's funny because some of his best work was really early on, 2005 era. That is Neil Marshall. He has directed Dog Soldiers, which is one of my personal favorites, also With the Descent. He has other movies like Doomsday, which did not do well at all, and Centurion with Michael Fassbender, which is not a horror movie, but he also went on to direct episodes of Game of Thrones, Westworld, Lost in Space, Hannibal, Constantine, and Black Sails. And I enjoyed his latest version of Hellboy, though that movie totally got dumped on last year. It was an okay film. And I'm going to end it with the obvious choice for me is the best director in horror as we speak, and that is James Wan, who shot on the scene with the movie Saw. He went on to do the very underrated Dead Silence. He did the Kevin Bacon revenge film Death Sentence, Insidious, and of course The Conjuring. He's also directed one of the Fast and Furious movies, Conjuring 2, recently, Aquaman, and he has Aquaman 2 in the works, but it seems like everything he touches, he does a really good job on. I think he's the best horror director working today. That is my list. Now, I left off Ari Aster, which I can't with that guy. Like, he can direct a film and he can build suspense, and I love the way he shoots his movies. I just don't like anything in his movies, which I've already bagged on Hereditary enough, and then Midsommar, I just can't muster up enough to watch that movie. So enough about him, but he is a good director, just not my cup of tea and not one of my favorites. I am going to give an honorable mention to Alexander Aja, who directed High Tension, one of the better remakes you'll ever see, The Hills Have Eyes. He did the very fun Piranha movie, and most recently he did the movie Crawl, which I thought was a very good and effective movie. It's one of my favorite, it is one of my favorite movies of 2019. I'll go ahead and put that out there because 2019 has been a down year for movies, so it is one of the more better summer movies that I enjoyed is Crawl, so special shout out to him. But just to run that list down again, you have Jordan Peele, Neil Marshall, Mike Flanagan, David Sandberg, James Wan, Fede Alvarez, Alexander Aja, and Andy Muschietti. Some of the best directors going today in the world of horror. Now let's talk about my personal list, my top 10 horror movies of all time. And I'll tell you why I love Halloween, and I've said this before. It's just, as a kid, there's no other feeling, and I don't know why, this is pretty strange, to watch a movie, one, you shouldn't be watching at that age, and two, to be just purely petrified to your core. There's something about horror movies, especially slasher films. I think that's really the decade of the slasher films. That's what I grew up on. And you got to remember, I was born in 77. So yes, I was watching Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 10. I was watching the Friday the 13th series. I was watching all that, probably when I shouldn't be. But there's something about that Halloween, that time of month, that I just absolutely love. I love the bad horror, the good horror, though I do tend, again, to gravitate towards the slasher genre along with the paranormal genre movies. And I'll just like to give some honorable mentions that didn't make my list but was close. I mentioned this film earlier. That was Don't Breathe. That was just on the cusp. A movie that really... There were a handful of movies that really shook me to my core when I was a kid. Nightmare on Elm Street was one of them. And only because that was the first villain or horror icon slasher that, to me, it was something new. Wes Craven invented a new way to scare a generation full of kids, because there's no way you could evade Freddy Krueger. Eventually, you're going to have to face him because he comes at you, of course, in your dreams, something everyone has to do. And to my recollection, that's the first time in horror that that premise was out there. Another movie that kind of really got under my skin, but it does not hold up well, is the Ray Bradbury classic Something Wicked Comes This Way, which is actually a Disney movie. There are some really unsettling scenes in that movie. And but if you go back and look it up, it is still unsettling, and it does have a nice creep factor in it, but it is very dated. That is a movie I would like to see redone down the line if they start redoing these movies. I don't know why that one hasn't been tapped. You had a nice cast with Jason Robards, Jonathan Pryce, and Diane Ladd. Pretty much about how a creepy circus comes to this small, idyllic Midwestern town, and people start bartering for things that they want or they need. And of course, it doesn't go their way. But there was a particular spider scene in that movie that will forever sit with me. So that was on my list, but after rewatching it, it just kind of played like one of those TV, just like an extra long episode of Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, something in that realm. And my last honorable mention is Stephen King's The Mist with Thomas Jane. Really good performance in this movie, but what really sold this movie to me, and I didn't read the book, so just know that going in. And if you've been listening to me for a while, if it's a book, I haven't read it. So, but this movie, the end of this movie was so ballsy and so unexpected, and I did not see it coming. It is, you want to talk about unsettling, the end of this movie was just a shot in the nutsack. There's no other way to put it, but it did not make my list. So let's start off with my number 10, and these are all classic films everyone's heard of, so I'm not going into great detail about it. I'm just giving you my top 10. Here we go, number 10. 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper, and just the way this movie was shot, and the cannibalistic fucking family, and just how creepy and weird it was. This movie gets under your skin. My number 9 is John Carpenter's 1982 The Thing with Kurt Russell. Great practical effects, and sometimes that's what usually does not hold up in the horror genre, are older movies that use a lot of practical effects. This is still top notch. Yeah, then you have the isolated setting that Kurt Russell and his crew's in. Yeah, this movie sticks with you for a while. Number 8 is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, made in 1960, and just a masterpiece of a film. Number 7 is Ridley Scott's Alien, 1979. Pretty much Jaws in space. No one will hear you scream. Enough said about that. Moving on to number 6. This is one of the newer movies in here. Well, newer. It's 14 years old. But that is Neil Marshall's 2005's The Descent. I just really like this. The setting of this movie. It's about a group of girlfriends, or women, sorry, that go spelunking in the caverns of North Carolina. And they stumble upon something that's not supposed to be there, and just that feeling of claustrophobia and how isolated they are. This movie just makes you feel that, and man, it is. The creatures in that movie were well done, and again, it just kept me on the edge of my seat. Number 5 is another new entry, as 2013's The Conjuring, one of the best haunted house supernatural movies you'll ever see. James Wan brought you that masterpiece. Number 4 is the aforementioned 1984 Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street. Again, as a kid, I remember that nursery rhyme stuck with me. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, yeah, the whole thing, the in your sleep. And yes, parts of that movie do not hold up right now, but just for the creation of the Freddy Krueger character itself, keeps it at number 4 for me. Number 3 is another John Carpenter film, his masterpiece in my opinion. That is 1978's Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. Enough said about that movie, as they're currently still making Halloween movies. Still holds up to me. I watch it every single year. Number 2, and I have this way higher than you'll see on most people's lists, and that is the 1976 Richard Donner movie The Omen with Gregory Peck, and it's about the movie of Satan's kid, and everything about this movie just scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, and yes, it still holds up today for the most part. But I think what elevated this movie for me was the usage of the score and just that creepy fucking kid. He was the perfect casting. I don't know whatever happened to that kid since this movie, but that kid had dead eyes along with that score and all the crazy shit that happened in that movie. Yeah, Omen will always sit number 2 for me. And number 1 is the 1973 William Friedkin movie, The Exorcist. And I think that's on most people's top 5. And that, to me, again, that movie does still hold up. And come to think of 1973, that must have done some damage to some people when they first saw that in the movie theater. Because, again, it's the supernatural movies that really get the most, for me, gets the most bang for my buck, are those movies. So that is my list. The only one that got bumped out this time around is I went back and rewatched 1982 Tobe Hooper movie Poltergeist. Outside of that clown scene, I think that's what messed me up when I was a kid, when that clown came to life and tried to choke the kid out. That movie just did not hold up the way I thought it would. So, I mean, sometimes you got to go out with the old and in with the new, and that's what I did. So the Poltergeist just missed out on my list. Here's my question for all you horror fans, or just movie fans in general. I would have put Jaws in here, but I consider that a horror film, but most people, the majority of people, don't. I also feel the same way about The Silence of the Lambs. I don't see that as a horror film, but if you look at everyone's top 10 or a lot of writers or magazine outlets, websites, they always have Silence of the Lambs and Jaws. The majority of them. I can't say all of them because I haven't read all of them. I consider Jaws more of a horror film than I do Silence of the Lambs, because that opening scene of Jaws is a masterpiece. And one thing a horror movie is supposed to do is really shake you to your roots. And I guarantee you, I know this for a fact, that movie scared a generation of kids of ever going in the water. Me included. I think I want to put my big toes in the goddamn water. So just for that opening scene and just everything about that movie, for me, I mean, really, really, really got to me. And I think that's the effectiveness of a good horror film. More so than Silence of the Lambs. That's why I didn't include those two films in my list. I could easily put Jaws in my top 3. And before I get into my It Chapter 2 review, I decided to do something a little fun. I decided to list the best scream queens in horror movie history. Yes, most of it, all of it, is based on looks. The only prerequisite I had is you had to be in more than one film. So, like Megan Fox, for example, she was in Jennifer's Body, has not made another horror movie. She does not really, in my book, qualify to be a scream queen. And these are in no particular order except for like the last 2. So I'll let you fight amongst yourselves. I'm going to start you off with Neve Campbell. Yes, she was in all 4 Scream movies, and she was in The Craft, so she's put her work in. Next on my list is Jessica Chastain, and you may not think of her as a horror actress or scream queen, but she was in Mama, It 2. She was in the Guillermo del Toro movie Crimson Peak, so she's been in 3 horror films. This one was dicey, but I decided to put her in. Jessica Biel, who was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, the remake, and I think that was her hottest during that movie. She was also in The Tall Man. If you want to stretch it, she was in Blade Trinity. So based on that, I put her in there as well. And just barely making the prerequisites here, Jennifer Love Hewitt, for I Know What You Did Last Summer 1 and 2. She makes quite the impression. Next on my list is Sherry Moon Zombie, basically for every damn Rob Zombie movie there is. I can't deny she looks pretty good. Moving on, and of course you have the Mistress of the Dark. You have Elvira, who, let me tell you something, she's been popping up here recently, and there's been talks about her getting a Netflix revival show, which that got shot down. I've recently seen her on some cooking shows, and she's almost 70. She's like 69. I looked this up, and I will tell you what, she is, to me, still hot. I mean, those sweater puppies are still popping. And I'm going to add her to the over 50 actress tournament bracket that I'm still working on. Add her to the list. Cassandra Peterson, you're on the list. Moving on down, you have Danielle Harris, who first popped on the scene as a kid in Halloween 4. She's been in the Rob Zombie remakes, and most recently, she's been in Hatchet 2, 3, and 4. And she is quite... Moving on to Sarah Michelle Gellar. Yep. Started off as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Moving on to movies like The Grudge, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Scream 2. So she has a nice little filmography there. But the last 2 I'm saving for right now is, and toss these 2 up in the air. You have, obviously, Jamie Lee Curtis, who, outside of the Michael Myers Halloween series, She was in The Fog, Prom Night, and Terror Train. So she's one of the original Scream Queens. But alongside next to her, I'm not going to say who's 1 and 2, but this one was one of my definitely favorites as a kid growing up. And there's 2 reasons why. And that is Adrienne Barbeau, who was in the Wes Craven Swamp Thing movie. Now, I really did notice her assets more or less in the Cannonball Run movie, but that's not a horror movie. Moving on, she was in The Creep Show and The Fog as well with Jamie Lee Curtis. And side note, can someone please tell me how to find or watch this movie? As I was looking up her filmography, this title just struck me and I have to watch that. I have to watch this. It is Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death, also with Bill Maher. Right? I have to, just based on the title alone, I have to watch that movie somehow. So that is what I'm going to try to do this week. But just to give you a nice quick recap, you have Jennifer Love Hewitt, Neve Campbell, Jessica Chastain, Jessica Biel, Danielle Harris, Sherry Moon Zombie, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Cassandra Peterson, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Adrienne Barbeau, my all-time Scream Queens. Now, I know you're like, wrap it up already, wrap it up, move on. It Chapter 2, which is currently sitting at 63%, critic score on Rotten Tomatoes with a 78% audience score. Now, I really did enjoy the first It chapter. Really good scares, really well crafted movie, well directed, well written. I liked it all, and I was really looking forward to It Chapter 2. And the long and short of it is this. This movie opens up with a nice little gut punch of a really brutal scene. Then it leads into Mike calling all the kids that are now grown-ups in their own careers back to Derry to once again take on Pennywise. So you have, I love the casting in this, that's a plus. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise knocks it out of the park again. I had no problem with all the superficial stuff. It was, again, everything in the middle. Everything in the middle. This movie to me was a little bloated. It has a 2 hour and 49 minute runtime. I honestly got bored with this movie. It took me 3 nights just to finish it. I love Bill Hader. I liked what he did with his role, but I felt like all his humor either fell flat, was mistimed, just did not land. I did not laugh really at any of the jokes he was spitting out, and he was spitting out a lot of them. I just found all the individual, once the pack of losers went on their separate ways and they were going through their own individual traumas with Pennywise, I just got bored. It was when the group was together that this movie really was brought into life. And I did like the use of Pennywise. They didn't overuse him because that could have gotten really repetitive. So they kept him hitting in the shadows just enough for me. Yeah, this movie just lacked that punch at the end for me. It was kind of anticlimactic. Again, but all the ingredients are there for a really great movie. But I compared it to most recently, and I know this is blasphemy up in the New Haven, Connecticut area. I just recently found out that Pizza Hut came out with a Cheez-It pizza. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. A Cheez-It pizza. So pretty much a giant Cheez-It stuffed with pizza ingredients. Once in a while when you come across one of those fast food spectacles, when they combine stuff, it seem kind of obvious at the time, but they do it and you're like, oh my God, that's going to be so good. Until you bite into it and you instantly regret it. Like, this was a bad idea. So that's the way I felt about It Chapter 2. It was like the Cheez-It pizza from Pizza Hut. Great idea. Looks awesome. You regret it right away. So I'm not going to kill it because there were too many good elements in this movie. But for me, I would give It Chapter 2 a 2.75 out of 5. Just barely above passing for me. And that's it, folks. That's all I got on this third Halloween special. Thanks for everyone who is listening. Next week, I promise, it is going to be a regular Media Mosh episode. I will have my Terminator Dark Fate review. I will get into all the news I skipped by today. Everything that's coming out on Netflix and Amazon Prime for the month of November. So buckle in, folks. It also might be a live episode. So in the meantime, go check me out on Facebook, Media Mosh. Go check out my Twitter handle at Shane Media Mosh. Go to the Apple Podcast Store, download me, share me, give me a 5-star review, or just a review, please. And circle back and check out the missus. This is her last week running, arguing myself. You can find her and him on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. 3 different platforms for 3 different types of content. I hope everyone has a great Halloween. Get caught up in the mosh.